Good afternoon, friends. David right here, and I am your host of the Disruptive Innovators Champions of Digital Business podcast. And this morning, I am lucky enough to be joined by Pavan Pidugu. Pavan, pleasure to have you on, my friend.
David, thank you for the invite, and it is my pleasure as well. I'm looking forward to the fun conversation.
Me too. I know it's been a little while in the making here, so great way to kick off the new year. Pavan, for those of our listeners who may not be familiar with your body of work, can you just tell everyone a little bit about your current role?
Sure. Thanks, David. So my job at the U.S. Department of Transportation, especially at the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, which is a long acronym for FMCSA, what we affectionately call, is as the Chief Technology Officer, provide the technology and tools for the safety advocates that are working in the federal government, as well as the state governments that work on behalf of federal government, to ensure that there are zero accidents that involve large trucks and buses. And our goal is to have zero fatalities and zero injuries during those accidents.
Wow.
So as the CTO, I'm responsible for building technology tools to make that safety advocacy more efficient and also more fun.
Yeah. Really interesting body of work. I'm excited to I'm sure I'll learn a lot today, which is one of the blessings of being able to host a podcast like this. So again, excited to dive into that. But Pavan, before we do, well, first I want to ask you, we like to start our episodes with just one. If you were to just come up with one piece of actionable advice you'd look to leave our listeners with, what would that be?
So I have always thought working in government was not for me.
Mm.
In the last 4 years that I have been working in federal government, the amount of impact that anybody can create, that working in private organizations, you're only focused on, like a lot of times, on innovations that make P&L for the company. But working in federal government is much more impactful and meaningful. So I would actually urge everybody that is top talent would think about giving a couple of years in your career to make such meaningful impact by working in a public sector environment.
I love that. You know, what I take away from that too, because I guess technically we're privately held entity, is what's my larger purpose? You know, how am I gonna be remembered? If I died tomorrow, you know, what would I be remembered for? And I think that being able to have a meaningful impact, whether it be working in the public sector, working in the nonprofit sector, you know, for me, currently at least, serving a lot of nonprofits that then go on to serve the public. You know, a number of years ago, we decided to go in that direction for that exact reason. So I think it's spot on advice. Pavan, let's learn a little bit more about you and kind of your story. So maybe how you started out in your career or in life, and kind of how you arrived to be the CTO of this federal entity.
So I would say one thing that brought me here, before diving deep into my background and the whole life story, is to not be afraid and ask for the opportunities. And a lot of times they come your way. Most of the roles that I have performed in my 20 years of professional journey, majority of them, I saw an opportunity and I asked, can I do that? What else can I do? So these are the questions I made people aware that I'm curious to learn and do different things that other people may be afraid or not wanting to do, or be the first one to be asked, so that way you're first in line for any of those roles, right? So I grew up in southern part of India, David, in a conservative and traditional Hindu family, joint family, and grew up in an environment where we were always told, study well, get in a position where you're not studying for yourself, but you're actually, when you are in a better position in life, you can actually help others to be better in their life as well. So that has been what, growing up with my grandparents until the age of 10, and then coming to transitioning into my living with my parents at the age of 11. It was symbolic and pretty straightforward from early on, that learnings, we just don't live for ourselves, we live for making life better for us and the people around us that could be depending on us. So I came to the US in 2002 as an exchange student. I was doing my MBA right after semester one. The university came and told me and a couple of other kids that, hey, you have been selected to go on a scholarship. You would finish the rest of your MBA in the US, and are you excited? And I was the least excited person when I heard that news, like my other two friends, but I was the fortunate one to be able to get my visa approved and come here and finish my graduation here, right? So I've been working in retail since I graduated. I've started doing a little bit of consulting right after MBA, and then a year later joined Target in Minneapolis. So since then, I've worked in large retail organizations such as Target, spent almost a decade in Walmart, a couple of different stints. In between my Walmart time, I had to work for a product company that also makes technology products for retail and financial sectors. I was part of NCR's retail business in support, while I had to leave Walmart's job and go to North Carolina in supporting my wife to get her MBA from Duke. So, throughout this period, I did different jobs in these three companies. One, I was always a personality that gets too bored too easily and too quickly with status quo. So I always was longing to learn more, do different things, different projects within these companies, different business areas, supporting different businesses, different projects, etc. So that has given me an ability to adapt to different situations that businesses throw at you or life throws at you. That gave me confidence in, worst case, we fail, but in the process of that failure, it's a learning opportunity, how not to fail. So more than successes, I probably had like a lot of ups and downs in how those projects got executed, etc. But end of the day, they gave the opportunity to be a better individual, be a better leader, right? Like, when I think of how I got here, I didn't get here alone. I got here through a lot of help from mentors and leaders that I worked for and I worked with. But at the same time, I also look at, in the process of me getting here, how have I transformed the other people that were relying on me, that were mentoring from me, that worked for me, right? So end of the day, it is about getting things done. Like, results matter for whether you work in a private industry or public sector or nonprofit, because bottom line, we're doing something in the expectation of an outcome. But in the process of getting those results achieved, how can you make life fun? How can you make that work environment fun was something that I've always longed for. So that thinking helped to grow in large organizations like Target and Walmart really, really fast, and be able to be the guy that people come to you when there is a project that people think it's the most complex and big. So that gave me opportunities, and obviously we were living in Bentonville, Arkansas, growing up in uh, a southern small temple town in India. I was okay living in Bentonville. It didn't matter much, but my wife grew up in Hyderabad, which is like one of the bigger metropolitan cities in India. So we always wanted the kids to be raised in a bigger metro for different opportunities that they could have. And by the time my daughter was in middle school, I was looking at what is next. And I have to thank one of my classmate from cohort member when I did my executive masters in Columbia. He suggested that I should start thinking about a place where technology is not widely used or not making going another role in retail industry where I've been playing for the last 20 years, but go in an area where the impact could be big. The splash, when you make a splash, that splash uh, is like a wave rather than like a splash from a bucket of water, right? So I should thank him for letting me think beyond retail. And there was an opportunity in the transportation department, and the mission attracted me. The mission for FMCSA is to ensure there are zero fatalities or death. Thankfully, um, I will never meet my customers whose life got saved because of the work that we are doing as an agency. But it is a great feeling to know that because of the great work that we as an organization did, saved somebody's life or saved somebody's limb or caught an accident that was prevented.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you said a lot of good stuff there, Pavan. One thing that you said early on that really stood out to me was about the like asking for the next challenge or the next opportunity, or and I think it takes the courage, to, because you're asking for something that is unknown, right? Which to some people can be scary, but you do it anyway, and you step into that new possibility. And I mean, it's very akin to what you did in moving kind of outside of retail into the federal space too. But I think that's really a really important takeaway for me. What would you say? What else would you say may have been one of the more important things that you learned kind of over the course of that journey, personally, professionally, or otherwise? And if you're thinking about kind of what was life before that and after that, are there any other lessons that stand out on the journey in your mind?
So you mean from the transition between Walmart gig and to the government sector?
Yeah,
Um,
or even in the transition from retail to retail, just any other kind of lessons that you took away.
so I think one big thing that I always want every leader to be uh, remembering in the back of their brain is, people are people. Um, let's understand people from that angle of people, whether performance driven organizations, uh, when the results are not achieved, let's understand why the results are not achieved, right? Like, have we given everything to the people to be successful? Have we put people in a position where they could succeed? Are these the right roles for those individuals, etc.? Rather than looking at purely subjectively of like, okay, this is the metric and keep checking the boxes, right? Like, be a little bit empathetic, but at the same time, uh, when you have to take tough decisions, don't hesitate. Don't delay those tough decisions that you have to take also, right? Like it's like that pendulum. You don't swing too much on one end or the other, but maintain that balance and be there when you have to be there, whether you need to be soft and empathetic or whether you need to be tough and make the right decision for the business. That is one that I've carried, with me all the time. And the biggest change that I actually saw when I moved from the retail sector to the government side, uh, it actually was, really, really surprising, but also something to be very, very ashamed of. People used to tell me, hey, this system, it doesn't work. It doesn't look great. People were like, it's a federal government system. What do you expect of? Which kind of is baffling because why are we okay with mediocrity? Why don't we actually, I mean, we are the government of the United States. We should have like the bar higher than any of the private organizations or other entities that we look up to as role models. We should be the role models to the industry. So that massive change in that thinking, especially in FMCSA that we were able to go through, was a big, big, big pride moment for me as well as my team to be able to bring that thinking, hey, we're no less or different than any tech organization in the world that you compare to. You want to compare to how Netflix things does or Google does or Amazon does. Why can't we have the same best practices for us in how we build tech? Because end of the day, I have engineers writing code that produces some outcome that will be used by some business entities, and same thing is being done whether in my previous role in Walmart or NCR or other areas, businesses, right? So having that mentality and cultural shift to lift those filters that, hey, we are federal government, we don't have to be high achievers, was a big, big achievement, right? Like, that was a big eye opener for a lot of my team. They often joke, some of the leadership when we talk, or my peers in other departments, they joke like, you think you're running a startup in DOT or what? So I don't know how to actually take it, but I tell them like, okay, I'll take it as a compliment. Thank you. And we want that startup culture within the federal government, right? Like I don't have to worry about, when my bootstrapping or my investment is going to dry out because I'm backed by the federal government. But at the same time, we don't have a free cash flow
A
of
blank
unlimited
check.
checks to
Yeah.
pay there, right? We get money through appropriations and we are bound to be able to wise that public taxpayers' dollars wisely and still get the results that we have to get. So in the 4 years that I've been here, that cultural transformation was a huge accomplishment, I would say.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I think you're single-handedly making me feel better about paying my federal taxes.
Thank you.
Because I mean, like the kind of mediocrity and like what kind of like seemingly well-known and accepted level of like, we'll keep the lights on. Like, I think is one of the reasons people get frustrated with like, government entities is like, the DMV or like these like institutions that like seemingly just kind of like float down the river. So yeah, the fact that you guys you're bent on having an impact and shifting things culturally is exciting to me. What about Pavan? Is there a time in your career, either in your time at now at the DOT or prior to then, that you either had a project fail or you experienced a personal hardship or just something in your journey that was like extremely difficult or trying or what have you, but you ultimately took away a really profound lesson or you had a perspective shift Any time like that stick out in your mind?
So I think every project that I was on was never a smooth sail. They always have had its downturn, and what got them to end successfully is how well we were tracking the progress, how well we were managing the expectations of the leadership and the stakeholders, and being able to communicate the bad news upfront and seek for help, right? Like a lot of times people think, if you share some negative outcome that is happening in your project, it's a bad thing and you're going to have negative impacts on your professional career, which is sadly not true, because when you tell people where you're stuck and ask for help, you're going to be given that help, and you will come out of the ditches that you're going to be in. So I'll give you one example where, when I was in NCR, we were working with a retailer that's, grocer based in Carolinas. They have like a decent number of stores, about 1,200, 1,300 stores in the country. And we were working on replacing their point of sale and store technology. And there was a time that store employees used to feel installing self-checkouts in any store is to actually remove people from those stores, right? Like again, it proved out to be not true, and it was to increase efficiencies in the store. Again, any technology you begin, you're going to start with people not liking it, then eventually getting used to it. And there will be some people that will never adapt into it also. So during this implementation of the project, the customer was very, very furious on the NCR team for putting technology that never worked, right? Like, they're looking at number of transactions that go through self-checkouts or these other things, and very limited usage of the tech. And the stores always blamed, hey, these things never work. This is a bad technology. We need it out of here because, so there was like this clash with leadership, right? Like, hey, this is a great tech. This doesn't work. I actually was not my customer account, but I was brought in to bridge the relationships and get things calmed down, the tensions calmed down. And I had to find and tell both organizations the reason why that technology doesn't work. Because the store managers people in the store used to unplug it. It was never turned on to begin with. So it was never working, which is a factual statement from a manager's perspective because it was not working. So the lesson that both organizations learned in that issue was not everything as it seems is true, right? There is an undercover reason behind something happening, and you got to take a couple of more steps to identify the root rather than blame it, right? So that was even a big lesson I learned when I went back to Walmart from working from NCR. My role at the time was being responsible for all the customer facing tech in any Walmart brand outside of the US. This ranges from all the way in Japan, China, Mexico, Brazil, Canada, all over the globe. And that lesson that I had from the incident in NCR in 2014 helped me a lot to look at the problem differently, because a lot of these problems that I faced in my role at that time in Walmart were more related to how you handle things based on the culture. What you say to a leader in Japan and how you say it, with what information, supportive information you give it, is completely different from the same role played by somebody in Brazil or Chile, right? So I molded myself to be able to look at the problem in a different perspective trying to understand, the root of the problem versus, okay, jumping onto the solution directly.
Yeah. I think it's great. It's a great lesson. It's one that, I think just yesterday or a day ago, like when these issues crop up, right? There's always different a different perception, different perspectives on why it's occurring, or someone will have their initial reaction or perception from their viewpoint. And so as a leader, and you kind of alluded to this, it's my job to really work to understand all the different sides of the coin before I work to understand. Because for example, let's say in that example that you gave, you would have just started by going after the your colleagues at NCR and just being like, guys, why isn't this working? The customer is furious, like, can't believe, like, here, but because you're going off what the customer told you, right? But you would have been that would have been ill-fated, right? And I think that oftentimes we'll get brought into difficult situations as a consultancy between a technology platform and a customer, and obviously we're hired by the customer, but the technology partners are also partners of ours, so we have to walk that line very carefully, where we're advocating for our customer, but at the same time we're not letting them buy their own bullshit, basically.
Right. Exactly, David. You're spot on, right? Like, I think in working in transformations for many years, one thing that I tell people, technology is the easiest piece. The technology is the easiest piece because it doesn't talk back to you. It doesn't create anything. Whatever the code you write in for, that's what it is going to do. It's basically, if your formulas are right, the computation would work as the formulas tell the computations to work for, right? You'll get the results part. It's the people and the processes that what makes or breaks these transformations.
Yep, you're absolutely right. So Pavan, I want to actually dive a little bit deeper into the work you guys are doing at DOT. Before we do, I always just like to ask, favorite book or literary piece, either that you've been reading recently, all time, just anything you'd like to share with the audience that has piqued your interest over the years.
So, there are a lot of favorite books. I'm a big fan of Jack Welch and Steve Jobs. So I try to do a lot of reading and articles about their leadership styles, what they are. Again, two different personalities. One very process driven, one very innovative and doesn't care a lot for processes or structures per se. And recently I've been doing a lot of reading about the spiritual leadership. Again, this is more trying to make sure that I get disciplined. There is one book called The Autobiography of a Yogi. That book has transformed my thinking and also helped me to maintain and balance my what I intake as a stress, and how do I manage what I intake and what I consume to be stressful, right? The intake has to be there with everything that's happening around you, but how do you actually control and process all of the things that you intake? That Autobiography of a Yogi is my favorite of all the times. And there is a Hindu saint called Swami Vivekananda. He is very popular in India because in 1930s, I don't remember the exact year, as a young 25, 28-year-old Indian monk, traveled to Chicago and delivered a speech. And it was like world wide telecasted back in the 30s about how he started off that speech by addressing the crowd as brothers and sisters of Chicago. And then there is like if you visit the History Museum right next to the Bean in Chicago, anytime an Indian or Asian visitor goes in, the staff in that museum asks, "Do you want to see where Swami Vivekananda spoke?" So it's that popular and famous, and he is also. I read a lot of his speeches, the books that he wrote back in the early 1900s, because they're inspirational, motivational, has nothing to do with religion or philosophy, but more like way of living and way of managing your day-to-day personal and professional life. So those are some of the things. But from a business perspective, I love to read about Jack Welch and Steve Jobs.
Well, I got to be honest with you, Pavan, and I've like not been shy to share my opinion on my podcast because I'm not syndicated. We don't have to answer to anyone, so I can kind of say whatever I want. But that's all just to say, I think my the biggest moments of growth that I can point to in my professional career have been rooted in personal and spiritual development. My personal and spiritual development as a human being, my ability to lead, my ability to handle adversity, like you were talking about, like what I heard when you were talking about stress, like the way that I refer to it nowadays is like I have pressure and I have the manifestation of pressure into stress, right? So like, for example, right now I'm dealing with a legal issue over here, professional legal issue. I'm dealing with, some clients that are not following the letter of their contract. I'm dealing with some stuff over here. And then I'm dealing with all the like family and personal stuff just kind of littered throughout. Me, call it 10 years ago, would be like freaking out. I'd be like, like, and I'd still probably get it done. And but like, I'd still probably maybe even seem okay during the day. But on the inside, I was just always so scared. I was driven by fear of losing what I had or not getting what I thought I needed, and it was just it could be crippling, to be honest. And today, I'm just there's a level of peace, inner peace, that is not mine, and I also recognize that my gifts are bestowed. Those are also not mine, and my role is to just be a servant in the world. And if I keep it simple for myself, where it's no longer about me and my ego and what am I going to gain, and I come at it from a place of service and how can I be of maximum use to my fellows and my family, and it's not only is it more fulfilling, but it the less that I think about myself, the better. I could tell you that. So
actually, I love it, David. It's I'm actually very inspired with those words that you just said, which is it's less about anybody as an individual. It's always about that broader picture. Even for me in my role as a CTO, it's not about what Pavan as a CTO is doing. It is about the entire office of the CTO, the technology unit. What are they delivering for FMCSA? But it's beyond what we deliver for FMCSA. It's about how those technology tools that we have developed is being used and how they are contributing to those reductions of fatalities, crashes, and accidents, right? Like, that is the ultimate thing that we care about, not about our individual contributions. How are we getting into limelight based on what we do? I mean, those are all my products, right? You do really, really well. Some of those things are going to come naturally, whether you want them or you don't want them.
Right. And that's been my experience too. I'm busier, and we grew 4x year over year last year. I'm
That's awesome.
so busier and more successful than I've ever been in my career, but more at peace and more grounded in spiritual principles than I've ever been in my career. Which, I have to give all the credit to that, truly. I mean, but anyway, so you were saying, Pavan, about about DOT, kind of the greater impact that you guys are able to have, the team is able to have, you as the CTO, but then you and your colleagues, is preventing fatalities. I mean, it is very, very, I don't know if cool is the right word, but it's cool to me that you guys are having an impact in that way, leveraging technology. Talk to me a little bit more about the technology itself. So what are some of the examples of like what you guys are working on? Because I'm very interested. I'm like, is he going to talk about like, geo tracing? Or are you going to talk about facial recognition? Like, or like, I have no idea. So I'm
I
really
think
intrigued.
most uh, technology is evolutionary and it's evolving on a day-to-day basis, right? So a few things that we have done in the last 2.5 years is to lay the foundation. So we use those evolutions appropriately at a fraction of cost and for the right use cases also. We're not running behind a technology evolution like computer vision or AI and try to find, okay, I have this technology, how do I use it? Versus we're actually thinking, okay, what problems do we have and what technologies are best to solve those problems? So, as an example, we have a lot of fraud that happens in the trucking space, whether it is people, you're moving your household goods, and as a customer, you get a call and say, hey, you need to pay 5,000 more dollars if your goods need to be delivered or not. So those kind of incidents happen on a daily basis, from what we hear. Like, our Office of Registration talks to FBI and DOJ on a regular basis, trying to mitigate this fraud. There is also other kind of fraud that actually happens. Me as a carrier, my data is used by somebody else to impersonate as me and has done some bad things. And my DOT authority gets canceled or revoked or whatever happens. And we hear about those things as well, etc. So what we are doing, which is, public news, we've been pretty vocal about wanting to implement it, and it's going to see its life in the next month and a half, is that we are doing identity verification, like how you go in a TSA pre-check lane or, enter through global entry. There is like facial recognition that identifies you as you and then ties it back to your operations. So you walk out of the airport freely, right? So we're leveraging similar concepts to be able to identify if you are registering for a new DOT number, you're going to be proved to make sure that you're using your own credentials to register an activity that's going to be impactful for our supply chain and the economy in the country, right? It's also tied back to safety too, right? If I am careful, I am the legal entity and I'm running my operations on my name, I have a lot of vested interest in making sure I follow the law to the compliance. If I'm fraudulent, then there is more likely chances of me being non-compliant to these safety standards as well. The other piece that we're trying to do also is we're modernizing all of our tech stack to that carrier companies, licensing companies, insurance companies that work with FMCSA to manage the entire supply chain, trucking industry as a whole. We're simplifying the tools that we give to them. Today, if you want to submit your application, it's cumbersome. You have to log in and do actions like in 7, 8 different places. You don't have to, as a customer, you don't have to go through the pain. You wouldn't expect to log on to Netflix or Prime or some other Disney platforms to watch a movie and expect you to go through those. You won't. You won't even interact
Do
with
it.
such things,
Yeah.
right? So us being the only provider of that service, we should do it, make it better, right? Like there is monopoly in federal government. I mean, like you can't say, okay, I don't go to FMCSA, but I'll go to somebody else to get my authority to operate a trucking company in the country. You have to come to us. So why do I make it harder for you, right? Like I have best interest to make sure that I give you an easy way, simple way to be able to interact.
Well, I think that, like, thank God you have this perspective, Pavan, but like I think the issue has been is like the attitude is like, well, you got to come through us. We're the only game in town, so we're only going to make it as good as we feel like making it in this moment, and
Well,
tough shit
it should be the opposite.
otherwise.
We are trying to, like I said, we are trying to make sure it's the opposite of, hey, I'm the only one that you can go to. Let me make sure it is the best experience that you can have working through with us. The last but not the least, we're also, again, in this day and age of the AI, right? We're looking at opportunities. We have a lot of data. We have a lot of data that we gather through 3 million plus inspections that we do at roadside. We have a lot of data through the investigations of these carrier companies based on the complaints we receive or other avenues that our field inspectors go get data on these companies. We want to be able to use, the AI machine learning models to promote safety, right? Like to analyze the data that we have. So the better rules are made, right? Like, there may be some laws that were made many years ago based on the information they had at the time, and maybe they are obsolete today. Or maybe we need to formulate new regulations based on what the data tells us, right? So we want to, again, we're cleaning up our foundation data. We're getting good governance put in place on our data so we can have artificial intelligence that guides us well. Otherwise, I've actually spoken to a bunch of CEOs that have invested like heavily in AI that asks me, hey, I have invested like $3-4 million in these AI models. It doesn't work for me. Why? So like, okay, have you taken a step to clean your data to begin with? Answer is, I don't know. Then AI is not going to help. Yeah, again, garbage in, garbage out, right? If you have garbage in, you can't expect miracles to happen, right? People magically think like, AI is going to be a magical and miracle tool. It's not. It's going to be an efficiency gainer if you put right time and effort in cleaning up your data and having the good data governance, and AI can do wonders.
Agreed. We had this conversation a lot. Like we do a lot of CX related initiatives, particularly right now in healthcare. But the advent of agent assist, so within a contact center or service center, that individual being able to leverage natural language processing over the course of the conversation to be fed the next best action or the associated knowledge article they need to pull up, or summation of the conversation or the definition of something the customer asked for, anything like that, is only as strong as the knowledge base itself. And knowledge management, which is just an extension of data management and data strategy and data governance, um, has been lacking in so many industries. Healthcare is only one of many industries, and another messed up part about that is that another thing that we're seeing is a lot of organizations have institutional or tribal knowledge that resides in the minds of oftentimes baby boomers or folks that are getting to be retirement age and are leaving the organization. And between the kind of disorganization of data to begin with, and the fact that that kind of institutional or operational knowledge then can potentially leave, or God forbid that person gets hit by a truck tomorrow, right? Like, what do you do with that? Like, you need to do something with that. Not to take advantage of AI, to put yourself in a position to, harness that data long term. Like, it starts with the first step, right?
We
So
will make sure, David, they won't get hit by a truck. That's why FMCSA
you're the right
exists.
guy. Yeah, you're the guy if you talk me to. Oh, that's great. Now, Pavan, this has been great. We're almost up on time. I mean, I have a couple last questions for you. One would be, what do you think will be some of the biggest changes in the transportation kind of industry, technologically or otherwise, or what are you most excited about for the prospects for the future? Any technologies that you think will be a game changer? Anything like that?
I think more and more people would start looking at uh, edge computing needs will arise, especially if you are thinking automation and autonomous vehicles, or even like having safety uh, technology put out on the highways throughout the country. Edge computing will probably become a little bit prominent in the upcoming years. I also think leveraging uh, artificial intelligence will continue to raise, but I hope and urge people to ensure that they do the foundational elements properly, because we've seen this hype of various technologies come and go, right? Like we've seen this with IoT, we've seen this with blockchain. People ran behind the technology without really understanding the right use case to be used for that, right? Hopefully, I don't think AI will become that, but I hope no company would fall behind that trap and make investments that they don't need to, or they don't get results.
Yeah, I still am blown away by blockchain myself, and I think that once the financial services industry truly figures out how to harness the potential for blockchain, it'll revolutionize the financial services industry completely. But that's a whole nother conversation for another day. So I would agree with you completely, Pavan. That I agree. I don't think it'll be that way, even if there is some of that. But I pray that less people have to suffer that fate of just getting caught up in the hype and not doing the work. So, um, this has been great, Pavan. I mean, it was such a pleasure having you on. The last question we like to ask our guests is just, if you could go back 5, 10, even 20 years in time, what advice would you give your younger self?
I think I would not change this, and I would actually do more uh, with my younger self, is being passionate. Uh, you know, what I am, how I got molded myself, and become the chief technology officer in one of the largest cabinets uh, in the government at the age of 38 a few years ago, was a lot of it had to go with the passion. Whether it was the right thing or the wrong thing, I don't know at the time. At the time you wouldn't know, right? Like my one other favorite leader that I have, the Microsoft CEO Satya says, you can only connect the dots backwards. After things have happened in the future, you look back and connect the dots, but you can just make a decision based on the data that you have at hand today. So I did take a lot of decisions, but I was very, very passionate in every single decision that I took, both in personal life and professional life. And that passion is visible and it's seen. You can't fake emotions and passions. And if you fake, they're going to be noticed and it's going to hinder professional success. But more importantly, the personal success, right? And again, whatever we become in our professional career, it's our personal life. If you want to become something, it's your personal choice. It's your personal ambition. It can happen in your work. It can happen in something else. Like, if you are a movie star or if you want to be a sports star, that's the profession you're choosing. I don't actually differentiate the professional and personal life separately. It's one and the same in my perspective.
I tend to agree. I mean, I kind of subscribe to the same thing. Well, Pavan, we could talk for a whole nother hour, but this has been tremendous. I really appreciate you taking the time today. Thank you so much.
This was my pleasure as well. I enjoyed the conversation, and thanks for having me on your show. I follow your show, and it's one of my favorites. And thanks for having me.
Oh gosh, no, it's an honor. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. We will catch you all next week.